The final mission. James Bond had always lived on the edge of danger. It was in his blood. The thrill of the chase, the rush of a mission, the taste of victory, all of it drove him forward, mission after mission. And yet, beneath the suave exterior and the sharp wit, Bond had always harbored one secret dream: to walk away from it all. To leave behind the violence, the endless betrayals, and the constant specter of death. He dreamed of a life of peace, a life far removed from the world of espionage and shadows, where he could finally be free. But dreams were dangerous things. It was supposed to be a simple mission. One last job before he could disappear, leave MI6, and fade into the world as a ghost. A high-level arms dealer had been moving deadly weapons across Europe, and Bond had been tasked with eliminating the threat. Routine, by his standards. But as with everything in Bond's world, things quickly spiraled out of control. The mission had gone wrong. Terribly wrong. He had tracked the arms dealer to an old, abandoned mansion deep in the Romanian mountains. It was a sprawling, gothic estate, its dark stone walls crumbling under the weight of centuries of secrets. Bond had entered the mansion with the same confidence he carried into every mission, but the deeper he ventured, the more something felt off. The halls were empty, save for the dust and cobwebs that clung to the walls like a shroud. The silence was thick, oppressive, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. Then the voices started. At first, they were faint, just whispers in the corners of his mind. Bond dismissed them, attributing them to stress or fatigue. But as he descended deeper into the mansion, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They weren't just voices, they were familiar voices. He could hear M's sharp, commanding tone, Q's dry wit, the playful, teasing laugh of one of his old lovers, long gone. He stopped in his tracks, gripping his Walther PPK tightly. His senses heightened. This was wrong. He had been in countless dangerous situations before, but nothing had ever felt like this. The mansion seemed to pulse with something, an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was as though the building itself was alive, watching him, waiting for him to fall into its trap. As Bond moved forward, the air grew colder. His breath came out in white puffs as he entered a vast, decaying ballroom. Chandeliers hung precariously from the ceiling, their crystals clouded with dust, casting faint shadows across the room. In the center of the ballroom was a grand mirror, its surface cracked and tarnished, reflecting only fragments of the space around it. That's when Bond saw it. In the mirror, standing behind him, was a figure, a man in a black tuxedo, the familiar bow tie perfectly tied, the gun in his hand raised and ready. It was Bond himself, but this wasn't a reflection. The figure moved independently, its eyes locking onto Bond's with a cold, dead stare. Bond turned quickly, gun at the ready, but there was no one there. He was alone in the ballroom, the only sound the echo of his own breathing. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. A shiver ran down Bond's spine. He had seen many strange things in his time, but this was something different. Something worse. The whispers grew louder, filling the room, wrapping around him like a fog. He could hear the voices of every person he had lost. Friends, enemies, lovers. They spoke in unison, their words twisting into a chorus of accusation. James, you can never escape. Bond clenched his jaw, trying to shake off the rising panic. He was James Bond. He didn't panic. He didn't let fear control him. But this place, This place was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It felt like the mansion was feeding off his past, off his regrets, his failures. He turned to leave, but the doors slammed shut behind him with a deafening crash. Bond ran to the doors, pulling on the handles with all his strength, but they wouldn't budge. It was as if the mansion itself had locked him inside, trapping him in this nightmarish version of his life. The whispers turned to laughter, dark, mocking laughter that echoed through the ballroom. And then, from the shadows, the figure from the mirror emerged again, stepping out into the dim light. This time, it didn't stop at the edge of the mirror. It moved toward Bond, its steps slow and deliberate. Bond raised his gun, his heart racing. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The figure stopped, standing just a few feet away. Its face was Bond's, but twisted, hollow. Its eyes were black, voids of nothingness. And when it spoke, its voice was Bond's as well, only colder, more sinister. "I am you," it said. "I am every choice you've made, every life you've taken, every moment of your past that you thought you could forget." Bond's finger hovered over the trigger, but something stopped him. This wasn't an enemy he could shoot or fight. This was something far worse, something from within himself. "You thought you could walk away," the figure continued, its voice dripping with malice. "You thought you could have a normal life. But you can't. You'll never be free of this, Bond. You'll never escape the shadows." Bond's hand trembled, his grip on the gun loosening. The figure moved closer until it was mere inches away, its breath cold against Bond's skin. "Your final mission, James," it whispered, "is to realize that you were never in control. You were always just a weapon, a tool, and now you are nothing." The room around him began to warp, the walls twisting, the ceiling stretching higher and higher until it vanished into darkness. The chandelier above swayed violently as the laughter of the voices grew louder, deafening. Bond stumbled back, his head spinning, his vision blurring. He could feel the mansion closing in on him, trapping him in a maze of his own making. In that moment, Bond realized the horrible truth. There would be no walking away, no peaceful life in the shadows. His dream of freedom had been an illusion. He was a spy, a killer, a weapon, and that was all he would ever be. The life he had dreamed of was as unreachable as the stars in the sky. And as the darkness consumed him, Bond knew that his final mission had already been completed. He had lost.